When Jesus was asked by his disciples, "What will be the signs of your return?" one of the highlights in Matthew 24 is there will be wars and rumors of wars. Upon further examination, today we see all three superpowers plus 5 other militaries that are armed with nuclear weapons and no less than 40 additional nations that are either in war or at the cusp of the edge. Additionally, many of these countries are lining up exactly as the prophets wrote in both the Old and New Testaments. Join us now as we break this down, plus additional headlines from around the globe in Bible Prophecy, January 2022. I am Mark Russick, and you are listening to The Russick Outlook. As always, just my opinion. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Russick. You're listening to The Russick Outlook. Thank you so much for joining. Today's topic, Modern Headlines, Bible Prophecy. This is part of a monthly series that we do, and this is for the month of January 2022. Here I sit at the end of January, in the middle or near the tail end, I should say, of a pretty serious blizzard here in the Northeast. So I am delighted to be indoors and recording this. And really excited about the topic, as usual. There's just an enormous amount of information that potentially points to exactly what the Lord laid out, and I believe the signs are there. So we're going to be examining that. If you're following me on video, I'm showing you tab 5782, which is the Hebrew calendar for where we're at today, as well as the Gregorian calendar of 2022. There's a slide in here called Wars and Rumors of Wars. And the reason I do that is, as we're going to look around the headlines, it just stood out to me, this specific scripture where Jesus was asked, what will be the sign of some of the signs of your return? And this is a scripture that we're going to highlight because I've never seen the world in such chaos or potentially at the brink of some very cataclysmic events. And there's so many different scenarios that could really trigger the world into going into a spiral. And I'm not saying that it will necessarily, but it is, I believe, in my personal opinion, things will begin to escalate and get worse as time goes by. I don't know the timing of it, but that's why I'm saying we're going to be covering a lot of that. I'm going to show you a map of a large part of the world, highlighting just what I'm saying. But before I do, if you wouldn't mind, I ask, and I'm serious, please hit the like and the subscribe button on whatever platform you're watching. Ring that bell and subscribe to our channel. The reason is, again, this helps us move the information out there, have people engaged, let people know, because as I've always said, our mission is about getting to the heart of the truth, no matter where it leads. And I try as best I can to objectively engage the different subjects that we look at, and also share the information. If you feel like this is valuable, if you feel like someone could benefit from it, share it. Let them see for themselves and evaluate for themselves. And again, you can do this on whatever platform you're watching or listening, but we're also on all the different social media platforms. And last but not least, please jump over to the Russick Outlook and sign up for our email list. We're about to begin some new videos beginning next month. We're built a small video studio that I'm very excited about. So we're going to be expanding our media reach. And also, we're going to begin, again, we were doing this last year, where we're going to be doing some online Zoom studies, and what I call Bible gatherings, because it's really designed to be for all of us and that we all benefit from it, meaning that you are free to engage if you have insight, questions, comments. It's a very loose setting in that sense because ultimately, we all need to benefit and learn and to grow. And a lot of times that takes the body to do that. So again, if you go down to the Russick Outlook and the email list, we can notify you of that. But okay, all business aside, let's get into this. Let's take a peek at what's going on around the world. So I have to say, if you're following me on video, it's a lot easier. I'll describe it as best as possible for our podcast listeners, but I'm showing you a map of a good part of Eastern Europe, some of touching in on Western Europe, Africa, the North African coast, the Middle East, Asia, the Asia Pacific. So it's a big part of the world. But I'm showing you in this map, I put X's where there are either wars or rumors of wars that are happening right now and in the month of January. So, and there's over 30 of them. So this is why I wanted to emphasize this. If you're, most people, and I'm sure, if you're watching or listening, you're very much aware of the developments that are going on in Ukraine, that the Russians have over 100,000 troops and military around the border of Ukraine. It looks like it will be potentially inevitable. So we're going to examine that. We're going to examine what the potential consequences of that could be. So we're going to be looking at that, as well as some of the other things that are happening around the world. The two things that jump out is the potential invasion of Russia to the Ukraine and China into Taiwan. We'll cover that, but I want to also look at some other developments and what's going on. So let's stick with Ukraine for a minute. I show you the map here with Russia, Belarus above that. And the reason I say that is what's so important to most parts of Europe is the natural gas that Russia provides, and it goes through several different pipelines, but a large part through Belarus. Belarus is tied in with Vladimir Putin. So you have not only Russian troops there and a military presence, but you have political cooperation. So, they hold the cards, and a big part of what they're trying to do is not let Ukraine join NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, and also potentially neighboring nations from getting involved. Their concern is the West moving towards Russia, and Russia now putting up its stance. As well as, there are other motives. You can go back to 2008 with their involvement with Georgia, which is, you see that right below the Ukraine. We know most people would know about Crimea. I'll show you that in a map in a second. So this is a very, very serious, volatile situation. It involves all of Europe, really. So that's why I'm saying, if this triggers the wrong way, you could easily get the world involved. And everybody around, or I should say the political leaders and the military leaders around the world are watching this. They have very open eyes and trying to kind of hedge their bets, if you will. So you can go as far south as Australia, and they're going to be very concerned about what's going on here as well. So there you have that. We're going to expand upon that a little bit. And I put the X by Germany, and I'm going to show why in the next slide, that Germany can really become very important. I show Turkey because for most people who are following the developments in the Middle East, the Ezekiel 38:39, the buildup of the militaries, just as the Bible described, which is now in Syria, you right above Israel. So you have the military from Turkey, Iran, Russia, all over there. Then you have Lebanon, which is the different proxies that Iran puts up. So that's why you see a bunch of X's over there. Iran's presence in Iraq is pretty overwhelming at this point. Although Jordan and Egypt aren't necessarily in conflict right now, I have X's there because their tensions are heightened. They also have a very big stake and a presence and a voice in what goes on in the Temple Mount. Jordan is actually responsible for the security of the Temple Mount. And obviously you have the Gaza Strip and so forth and so on. And I say that because I'm kind of assuming that many people are very familiar with the volatility that exists right now over there. Then you have below that Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of developments that are going on just below Saudi Arabia in Yemen, where you have another offshoot of the Iranian proxies called the Houthis. They are firing missiles into Saudi Arabia. They're causing disruption in the Arabian Sea by Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, just wreaking havoc in that area because they also have missiles that can reach Israel. So we'll get a little bit more into that. I'll show you some developments there. Afghanistan, most people would be familiar with what happened in Afghanistan with the U.S. pulling out. Well, now there's a lot of new developments in China and Russia having their voices in there. Then you have Pakistan, a nuclear nation, and right next to Afghanistan. But what's interesting is they've been forming some military and strategic alliances with Azerbaijan, which is above Iran, above Turkmenistan. And what's interesting there is Iran, is very nervous because that there is conflict there, and you would think that being a neighbor, you would be in agreement, but that's just not the case. So that goes back many years. Their arguments, I'll say, you can. Let me just say that back in the 44th administration, Israel had a deal with Azerbaijan to land and refuel airspace in there, because that's a big part of what their challenges are. It's to getting to Iran, and that was blown up by the 44th president. He gave that up, that information, so that put Azerbaijan in a difficult light there. Kazakhstan, there's been some developments there. There's hostilities. People are growing. There's a growing unrest because of the energy shortages, and you've got the Russians moved into military, and they were help supporting that administration over there. So obviously, many nations are feeling the hike in inflation and the energy situation. If I'm here in America, the gas bill has gone up dramatically. You go to the gas station, you pump up your car, your truck, you know what it's like. And obviously, a lot of the policies that are going forth out of the 46th administration is directly a result of this. And I would say a lot of that is intentional by design. So, here you have that. I'm trying to make sure I hit all these countries. Then moving to the east with China and Asia. Interesting developments there in the northern part of India. They have roughly 200,000 soldiers. This has been going on since the middle of last year. And then New Delhi and the Indian government put up 100,000. They obviously don't have the size. Think about that, 200,000, and that's just, it's just a pittance compared to what the Chinese military can put up. But what has been developing is the weather is so cold and so fierce, and you're not used to it, whereas a lot of the Indian military is. So they've been putting up AI and putting up robotics and machines up there now as part of their military support. So technology taking place in there. And then you've got the situation with Hong Kong, how China has just blown off that the agreement that they had with the Brits. And, so many people have lost their freedom there. They're in jail, they're in prison. Taiwan, we're going to get into it, where this past month you have a number of incursions into Taiwanese airspace by the Chinese military, then go up to the North Korea, South Korea, North Korea, engaging a half a dozen different missile tests. And so, obviously this part of Asia being very concerned, Japan's very concerned about what's going on there. And, I would think a large influence, obviously, is North Korea, is with the government of Beijing. So, there you have kind of a snapshot. Oh, let me just segue over to North Africa, Libya, Sudan, and Ethiopia, Somalia. I'm pointing that out because of so many of the different Muslim terrorist organizations, offshoots of Al Qaeda and ISIS, and I forget how you pronounce it, Haram. No, I'm not saying that right. So bear with me. But you get the idea. There's a lot of unrest there. Then if you move up the coast, you don't see Morocco here, but you do see Algeria. And there's developments there because Morocco signed a deal and they have relations now with Israel, security relations, some potential military developments. And Algeria has been a staunch opponent of this. They don't want to recognize anything until the Palestinians get their stake in the land and East Jerusalem is given to them. So they're threatening war with Morocco. So all of this is going on right now as we speak in January of 2022. So that's why I say, I just kind of wanted to give you a snapshot. So let me dive a little bit deeper into what's going on in Ukraine. I give you a couple of different maps just to, kind of give you an idea of how the West is threatened. Here I show you on the left Hungary, Austria, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Germany, Poland, and then you have Ukraine, Belarus on the border. And I'm giving you a couple of different angles so you kind of understand. And I also, what I did was I showed you on the bottom, there's a small map of Crimea. You can see it on the top right as well. Just so you know, that's not now under Russian domain and in the Black Sea. So not only you have military presence on the land, you have military presence surrounding in the Black Sea as well, in some very key ports, obviously, as well as the air power. The reason I'm kind of emphasizing Germany is I've been seeing a little bit of flip-flopping back and forth with Germany over the past couple of weeks, because it's almost like they're hedging their bets, where they're obviously potentially the largest and most significant nation in Western Europe, and they certainly have the most sway and the most influence in terms of NATO and the economics behind the German economy. But what's been going on is they've been hesitant and nervous about the gas line situation and what's going in. So even as much as a couple of weeks ago, they seem to be moving to Russia. Now, I hear some other things coming out of NATO where they're supporting NATO. I say it this way because I'm showing you Ezekiel 38:39, a map of that on the bottom. And a lot of what these names are, the biblical names as outlined to the prophet Ezekiel, because at the time that's what it was. And here, the prince is Rosh of Magog. It's called, the War of Gog of Magog, and that's Gog is what I would say is a prince or a military or a political leader, a president, prime minister, things like that. And Rosh is not, Russia because of the R, and it sounds like it. It goes back. And there's specific ties to this land at the time. This is what it was called, but it happens to be modern-day Russia for the most part. Then you have all the Stan countries, which is Magog and Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. Interestingly enough, you see what's happened with Afghanistan lately, and then Iran is Persia. And Meshach, Tubal, Gomer is Turkey. There are some who believe that goes as far as the land of Germany. And that's the reason I'm putting that up, because I remember looking at this a couple of years ago and go, yeah, that can't be Germany. But now as I'm watching some of these political developments, maybe it is. I'm just pointing it out. I'm not saying it is definitively. All I'm saying is there are some Bible scholars who believe that those names go as far as covering what is now modern-day Germany. So this, again, setting the stage for what may be coming down the pike, where the alliances are certainly being built with what has been laid out in Ezekiel 38 and 39. So let's just jump at the headlines of what we see, wars and rumors of wars. So the scripture is Matthew 24:6, and he says this, and this is Jesus speaking. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And you can go on in Scripture, and it says, when you see these things, look up, for your redemption draws nigh. So what I'm laying out for you and showing you, if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, you can take comfort in it. And if you're not, my point here is to look at all the things that are developing exactly as the Lord had laid this out. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit intentionally, almost like you're going to open up a newspaper and headlines and see the different things that are happening around the world. So you have 2 U.S. carriers are now entering the South China Sea in response to what's been going on with China. Then you had the U.S. air defense system was successful in the UAE from an attack by the Houthis into the United Arab Emirates. So that's Yemen. And what's interesting there, what's happened in January, is they're now expanding their reach not only to Saudi Arabia, but they're going after others that are tied to the Abraham Accords. So there's these delineations and lines in the sand being drawn. So you have the United Arab Emirates joining there and into the Abraham Accords. So there's developments, not only economics, military, security, alliances are being built with Israel, and Iran clearly doesn't like that, and the Houthis being a proxy, they're now engaging in military activity, and they can send drones and so forth. So that's going on. Turkey, Israel's agenda. Give nothing, get at nothing. This was an analysis done in Turkey where it says Ankara, which is the capital of Turkey, their narrative today is that Israel should route its gas, its natural gas. And this is important, too, if you look at Ezekiel, because they have something the world wants, and they're building a pipeline across the Mediterranean into Italy. They have agreements with Italy and Crete and Greece, but they want to route things through Turkey so that they can take the profits and fund Hamas in the Gaza Strip and in various Israeli territories. Jump over to Israel and China celebrate 30 years of ties amid U.S. pressure. Interesting development there. You know, many nations do not see the United States as a secure partner anymore, just especially what happened in Afghanistan. And there's been tensions going on with the Democrats in the United States and Israel for a long time anyway. Not all of them, but you know that you can go back a couple of administrations to that. So Israel, you know, I guess, they're looking to hedge their bets as well as others. Saudi Arabia is doing the same thing. United Arab Emirates are doing the same thing. So, it's, again, this leads to further instability in the world. Just the other day, United States tells their diplomats to leave the Ukraine, that they believe, war is coming, war is inevitable. There was a situation the other day where the president of the United States had a press conference, and it was an embarrassment. It was horrible. But one of the things when he was talking about Ukraine was, if it's a minor incursion, not that bad. We might not do too much, something. I'm paraphrasing, but he was very, very wishy-washy. And obviously that took the Ukrainians and many others around the world as going, here we go again, and his press conference was just kind of all over the place. So that was another thing that happened. Let's jump to Russia and Syria. They are now doing joint military exercises along the Syrian-Israeli border by the Golan Heights. So they've now joined forces and in protecting that part of the world and protecting Syria. And what's interesting there is the Israelis had sent some bombs in December and blew up some Iranian ports or Iranian military housing. I'll call it, but what was believed to be some buildings that was holding some missiles and different arms that had come in from Iran. At any rate, apparently with Russia's know-how, they were able to bomb ports in the port of Latvia. They are now, all of a sudden, the Russians are protecting that area. So, interesting developments there. Then there's another article coming out of Israel says 2022 started with a bang. Hamas fires 2 rockets at Israel's most populous city, Tel Aviv. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but again, you can see how that could, easily lead into another incursion, similar to what we saw with the 11-day war in May of 2021. I talked about the warplanes in the Syrian port. China's ambassador to the U.S. warns of military conflict over Iran. Then, and this just happened again a few days ago, near the end of January, Iran, China, and Russia holding war games in the Indian Ocean. So here you have what I would say are 3 staunch enemies of the West, and they are forming an alliance. They are forming strategic partnerships, and China has engaged with Iran in exchange for gas and fuel and oil. I think it was somewhere in the area of $450 billion over a 20-year period. So they've got that. So, China's making its way into the Middle East. Obviously, about Russia. So again, just more things that are going on, more very, very troubling developments, I'll call it. The Israeli Air Force, interesting, coming out of Israel, some of the military leaders. It's noteworthy that Israel's military leaders are now referring to the potential of a strike at any moment, assuming that it will soon happen. By that I mean a strike into Iran, to their nuclear facilities, because time has ticked by. The West has kind of dragged their feet. They've tried to re-engage this accord that was signed in 2015, and which was nothing more than a big bribery, and it didn't get us anywhere anyway. But Israel's running out of time the way they see it, because Iran wants to attack. They've been on record for decades. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the map. Israel clearly can't let that happen. Israel's Air Force chief sees an attack in Iran exploding into a larger regional war, and he is ready to command that attack. Iran sees ties with Russia as the new Middle East. There was a meeting with Ibrahim Raisi and Vladimir Putin on January 19th. They believe, saying what came out of that could be a turning point in political, economic, and trade relations between Iran and Russia. Morocco and Algeria preparing for war. Again, I talked about that at the top. That's making headlines over there in that part of the world. And, the militaries are building up, specifically Algeria. So, something else to watch. Kazakhstan, I talked briefly about that, where you had demonstrations over the fuel shortages and the instability in the economy as a result of that. So you had the Russians come in and bolster up that government. North Korea, all of a sudden, it feels comfortable. Now it's fired, where I sit today, 6 different missile tests in the month of January alone. So, clearly, again, this is what I would say. There's no concern or no fear about the West and the United States in particular. The UAE, the attack will not go unpunished. This was the attack by the drones, by the Houthis on Abu Dhabi. The Saudi-led coalition blocks drones that attacked in Saudi Arabia. So again, they're combining their military, their missile program and their drone program to knock these down, which is a lot of this is now being supported and potentially or military trade relations with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain. This is now going on as a result of the Abraham Accords. So, interesting developments there. So Saudi Arabia, when they see these attacks on Bahrain and the UAE, they're stepping right in line with them, because they're viewing that as an attack towards them. Then I show you here on the bottom, going back to the Ukraine, just where the military alliance or the buildup is. So I show you these in the red circles, where all right now, and including in Belarus and Crimea, the ports. And then I give you some things about what the difference in resources are. So, for instance, the naval forces, 605 naval ships to 38, 4,100 aircraft to 318, 850,000 ground troops to 200,000. It's 5, 6, 7, 8 times the amount in tanks and fighter aircraft and destroyers and helicopters. I mean, they are greatly outnumbered. So depending upon, NATO's presence, what they will do, the United States has sent some military assistance over there. There is supposedly 5,000 troops on its way over. So we'll see how that flies out. I'm showing you on the bottom right, General Keane, who is a retired military general, great strategist and just a tremendous resource. He had an interesting analysis where he feels like the invasion will happen, but it would happen after February 21st. He doesn't see it happening before the Olympics in Beijing, because Putin will be there. He doesn't want to upstage what Xi Jinping is trying to accomplish as far as this imaginary goodwill, trying to have people look the other way to the human rights atrocities that are happening there. And he also said, because of the timing of the weather, He said after that is when the ground becomes frozen, and that's important for the tanks and the missiles that they can get onto stable ground before firing into potentially into the Ukraine. There was also concern about that the Russians supposedly have enough sophistication to hack into our power grids, and that they could potentially shut down some of our power resources in and around the country. That they've proven that, I think, as far as 2015. So depending upon what our response is, Russia may turn around and do something like that. Then I talked about how China flies 39 warplanes into Taiwan's air defense system in a day. I show you what's going on. Then there was 27 Chinese military aircraft. So that's going on in China and Taiwan. So interestingly, at the same time, here you have China, Iran, and Russia holding joint military exercises together. They are three of them right now are very close, if not actually engaged in war. Russia to the Ukraine. They've even have military exercises off the Irish coast. So again, making the West even more nervous. Iran and its proxies and what it's doing into Saudi Arabia, Israel, and then you have China into Taiwan. And it's not getting a lot of mention, but as I said, with what's going on in India, and also the destruction, I would say, or the takedown of Hong Kong. So yeah, a lot happening just right there. So I wanted to read something here. The burden is Zechariah 12:1-3, and again, this just points out just how accurate the Bible is. It says, "The burden of the word of the Lord against Israel. Thus says the Lord, who stretches out the heavens, lays the foundation of the earth, forms the spirit of man with him." Now here I have it in yellow highlights. "Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all surrounding peoples when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall happen in that day that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All would heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all the nations of the earth are gathered against it." You can see that developing and happening today. You can see the armies of Ezekiel, of what was outlined there. They're on the Israeli border today in Syria, Iran, Russia, Turkey. It's all happening. So I throw out a couple of questions. Could a possibility include an Iranian attack of U.S. forces in the Middle East and Iraq, which could draw the U.S. back into open conflict? You have a lot of that happening right now. Iran is attacking U.S. facilities in Iraq. Then here's another question. Will Iran unleash Hamas and Hezbollah against Israel, sparking a proxy war? Could be, but also, what if Israel goes forward and takes down some nuclear complexes in Iran? They're going to unleash the rockets that they have in Lebanon and different areas in Syria, as well as by the Gaza Strip. Would Syria strike against Israel? So there's so much that could happen, and it could happen like that, just with the snap of a finger. One action could potentially trigger so much more. Then I'm just kind of going with the theme of the disdain towards Israel. It's to me, in my opinion, it's spiritual. It is a spirit. The anti-Semitism that happens today. I'm showing you there was a Texas synagogue that went under attack in January 15th. Most people in America, they're familiar with that. Just the other day, Jeremy Corbyn in the UK Labour Party, he was barred from re-engaging onto the political stage because of systematic anti-Semitism. So he was trying to get back in there. Then you have this major push around the world and propaganda that Israel is somehow some type of apartheid state, comparing it to South Africa in the 70s and early 80s. And they've been doing this year after year after year. It's throughout the UN. And the more you say it, the more you keep emphasizing these lies, all of a sudden it becomes truth to some. France came out with a revelation of their analysis in crime that there were 75% increase in 2021 of anti-Semitic incidents. So again, more and more you see the world's coming against Israel, which is God's people, the Hebrews. But, these are just more and more signs. I'm trying to point to the obvious. So let me get off the wars just for a second. I'll switch to a medical war, which I think would involve the end days too, in terms of the technology that's being used. COVID, it's just getting worse in terms of supposedly the response. Then you even have in America where the 46th president's administration is holding up different medications that could be released that are not tied directly to the vaccines. And the success rate that they've had has been very impressive, but they're shutting the voices down of doctors and medical professionals and nurses that are advocating some of the successes they had. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear any dissent. They're trying to shut it down. There was an article out of Israel that said, shame on Biden. He promised to stop the virus, but it's exploding. Where is the cure? And they, point out what a Twitter political campaign slogan was in October of 2020. I'm not going to shut down the country. I'm not going to shut down the economy. I'm not going to shut down the virus. He's done the complete opposite. More people trying to get at the heart of the truth of what happened in Wuhan, because this was a biological attack. Again, they're being stifled. Their mouths are being shut down. Then you have in Israel, they're approving a fourth vaccine shot for the immune compromised. And it goes on and on and on. There has been a call for many people in Israel for prayer and fasting. And they've appealed to the government of Israel, and Bennett, who is, my understanding, is a devout religious Jew. But he has not said that yet. He's not chosen that. I don't think he said no, but he's not embraced it. That call for a national day of prayer and fasting, or a week. But obviously, that sounds like a good idea. But who knows? Switching over to some other interesting developments that came out last month. The growing demand for biblical blue dye. It was lost for over 1,600 years, and this becomes important when you get into the last days and the millennium, that this would have to be prevalent. I'm going to read you the scripture, Numbers 15:38 through 39. It says, "Speak to the children of Israel. Tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, to put a blue thread in the tassels of the corners. And you shall have the tassel, that you may look upon it and remember all of the commandments and the Lord to do them." So this, all of a sudden, is now come about. This dye is mentioned 49 different times in the Old Testament, but they are forming these bracelets or necklaces, and it's being produced by a nonprofit called Pital Tekalet, which uses an ancient process to create these. So they have now, let me see the numbers here, since 1991, producing about 300 sets of 4 in the first year. Now, to date, they have produced an astounding 270,000 of these necklaces. So, it's interesting, what's going on here. And again, this just lines up with what would be necessary for the millennium, that these threads and everything for the new temple would be present. Also, I'm showing you a picture on the left. I don't know that it means anything, but I just wanted to point it out. There was snow in Jerusalem last week. So it was called the Storm Elpis, and it happened in different parts of Israel. But I'm showing you here on the Temple Mount, kids playing in the snow, which I'm sure to them it was like, whoa, what is this? The other interesting development for the Israelis in terms of the Ukraine, they are meeting to plan for potential airlifts of Ukrainian Jews and getting them out of there and bringing them to the land of Israel, which is a part of what they've done all around the world. It's called Aliyah. And so, again, that's just another development that has ties to the Russians and the Ukrainians. NASA reacts or asks religions to react to alien life. So, what's been interesting over the past 6 months, 7 months, the United States government has released the fact that they have had what they say some type of alien contact or things that they can't describe. But now they've been reaching out, and this goes back to 2016. I just became familiar with this, to different theologians, different religious organizations, and it's almost like they're potentially greasing the skids, paving the way for what could be coming down. So many people believe that, including myself, that I believe the rapture would happen before the tribulation. That how do you explain that? And they think that there are some people who think that this could be tied into the admittance or admitting to alien life outside of what we know here today on Earth. But what's interesting is that they're reaching out to the religious organizations. So it is potentially, or I should say it's a possibility that world governments will use alien contact or alien abduction as a way to explain the confusing event like the rapture. So if you had the rapture today, potentially a quarter of the population of the world will vanish instantly. How do you explain that? So 2 Thessalonians 2:11 through 12 says this, and for this reason God will send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they shall all that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So there are some who are pointing to this scripture and saying, could this be it? So what if the Antichrist at the time, because if you're talking after the rapture in the beginning of the period of tribulation, could he be using this that, this is a reason that there was so-called alien contact? What if he uses this as a means to get onto the world stage, that the world would be dealing with all of these catastrophes, and then he comes up with, as what I'll say, Mr. Solution. So it's just interesting that this came about. The government's now, acknowledging this over the past 6 months or so. There are videos out there of military contacts and exercise. Well, I should say, engage, disengage with these alien forms. It defies anything that we know of, any type of technology today, where it can go from 0 to 600 miles in an instant, and just stop on a dime, go into the ocean. And there's videos of the military videos of this where the pilots were kind of freaking out, going, "What is this?" They'd never seen anything like this. So the fact that this is all coming out now is suspicious, because obviously the governments would have had this information for the past 20, 30 years. This is not anything new, but now that they're releasing it is new. And now we see that NASA is reaching out to religious organizations. Earthquakes. Well, you've had a couple of earthquakes in northern Israel within 24 hours. I say that's, particularly interesting because you very rarely have earthquakes in that part of the world. So, most people would know that there will be earthquakes and that these would be part of the birth pangs. And I've said this often, if you look at the increase in earthquakes going exponentially year by year, you can see that it's coming closer and closer. You also had the undersea volcano off the island of Tonga. It went 12 miles into the air, creating a cloud of sulfur dioxide over the region. It was the largest volcanic eruption in 3 decades, with shock waves traveling thousands of miles. So again, these are just some interesting developments, just kind of pointing them out. This is what's happening around the world, and the Bible does mention some of these things. When you see these signs, look up, your redemption draws nigh. Economics. The shekel is the weakest in 2 months. I wanted to point out 2 Israeli companies here. I'm not 100% sure of this. I should have checked this beforehand. I believe Israel is right around the 5th largest GDP in the world today. Consider their nation, that tiny, tiny nation, the size of Lake Michigan, New Jersey, is one of the largest, most influential, most lucrative, prospering countries in the world. Obviously, this was prophesied in many different instances, and here you see it. But I was going to point out Israel's Digital Owl raised $20 million for a language processing technology. They are basically using this to analyze and summarize medical records. They announced this $20 million round that was led by a global private equity company. Then you have two other Jewish women in Israel, Lenore Danielle and Sivan Friedman Yosef. They have a neuromarketing concept where they've launched a Series A funding round, attempting to get into the United States markets. And in doing so, what they're trying to do is receive insights that can influence sales. They do this by tracking your eyes, your facial expressions, and other indicators of emotions. This is not super new. There are American companies that have been looking at this. I'm sure European companies. But my understanding is their technology is a notch above. And again, it's kind of, you're trying to read the lines, and this is obviously data that would become very important to marketing arms and to companies who are trying to advertise within the different realms. Let me close by a couple of other things that I found interesting. The Germany Museum put on a play presenting Jesus as a transgender. This included the Bible that it contains LGBTQ themes. It's called You Are As Good As You Are. It had a figurine of Asherah, which was a pagan fertility god, and the image of a new Adam, which the report described as a two-headed creature with both male and female features. Think about what's going on with, everything that you see today, and we are now all of a sudden, we have multiple sexes supposedly. Also featured in the play was The Gospel According to Jesus, Queen of Heaven, which was authored by a transgender who identifies as Joe Clifford. Again, just interesting signs going on there. Churches raising alarm against Canadian laws that are happening. Where it's basically if you are counseling anybody against homosexuality, they can potentially put you in jail for up to 5 years for that. There's been also some other attacks on the church in Canada, which I love Canada. I love the Canadian people. But what I'm seeing in that government over the last few years is just heartbreaking. And they're trying to shut down churches. They're trying to stop the gospel being preached, not the people, but the government. Meta, Facebook owner, wants to build the most powerful AI supercomputer in the world, January 24th. The Facebook owner, which we all know, has already designed and built what is called AI Research Supercluster, or RSC, which it says is among the fastest AI computers in the world. It hopes to top that league by mid-2022, so we're talking about sometime this year. And it would be a major step towards increasing its artificial intelligence capabilities. So, if you follow me on video to the right, this was very interesting. China develops AI prosecutor capable of evaluating crimes and filing charges. So, you can find yourself in a courtroom and a machine is going to say whether you're guilty or innocent. These scientists have developed the AI system that can examine evidence and charges people with crimes as defined by China's totalitarian parody of the Western justice system. The developers claim that the AI prosecutor is over 90%, 97% accurate when it files charges. So, you can't make this stuff up, which is why I grabbed the headlines, which is why I show you these things. I'm not, just making this up. I'm taking this from various resources all around the world, being, as open, as transparent as possible. So that's kind of the snapshot of where we are for January 2022. In closing, I would just say, if you are so inclined to, please continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem as Jesus instructed us, but also pray for the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian government, the Taiwanese, and others all around the world. These are very serious, volatile times. Again, anything can trigger a catastrophe that could just escalate to potentially another world war. So again, even all the more reason, if you do not know the Lord, now is the time. And it's as simple as, Lord, I'm a sinner. Please come into my heart. Forgive me of my sins. Let me engage in a life with you. And I'm making it as simple. I'm not saying, but the Bible says Those who believe in their heart, confess with their mouth that Jesus is the Christ, they shall be saved. So, there you have it. That's the most important thing I can ever say in any of these presentations. So I hope you take heed to that. Thank you, as always, for joining. My name is Mark Russick. Questions, comments, email me at Russick Outlook. And remember, as always, just my opinion.